lesson on the midpoint formula. Okay, how do you find the midpoint? First of all, let's say we have 2 points, these ones here, and we want to find this midpoint. I'm going to call it MP. It's unknown, but we do know that this begins at 2 on the x and goes to 9. And this begins at 3 on the y, 3, and goes up to 9. So first, we need to know the distance between those two. The distance can be found to be 7. From 2 to 9 must be 7, right? Or you can do 9 minus 2 to get that 7. And the midpoint is going to be, the midpoint there is going to be also the midpoint from here to here. So the midpoint from there to there, since it is 7, this must be 3.5 and this must be 3.5. From there to there, and from there to there, 3.5, because together that's 7, right? So you go 3.5, 3.5, you go up, and that brings you to the x value of the midpoint. And that is 5.5, because if you do 2 plus 3.5, you get to 5.5. If you do 9 minus 3.5, you get to 5.5. So that must be the middle value of the x. Alright, then you look at the y the same way. How far are those apart? Those are 6, a distance of 6, or 9 minus 3, which is a distance of 6. Alright, if you go halfway to the middle, it means you're going 3 from that side and 3 from that side, because that makes 6 altogether. So if you go 3 there and 3 there, it's like saying 3 plus 3, where does it bring you? Or 9 minus 3, where does that bring you? And that brings you to the same point. 3 plus 3 is 6, 9 minus 3 is 6, so the y value must be 6. So there's our midpoint. Now, how do you create a formula out of that? Well, let's think about it. 5.5 is right in the middle of 2 and 9. And the middle is something called the average. Okay, so if we want to find the middle of 2 and 9, because that's where the x value is going to be in the middle, it's an average. The middle of anything is an average. And to find an average, how do we do that? How do we find the average of 2 and 9? Well, the average can be found by adding the two numbers and dividing by 2, right? If somebody said find the average of these two numbers, you would add them and divide by 2. If somebody said find the average of 3 numbers, you would add the 3 numbers and divide by 3. But here we have 2 numbers, so 2 plus 9 divided by 2 is 5.5. So those two values added, divided by 2, gives us that middle value, 5.5. And this is where the midpoint formula comes from. This is our x1 value and our x2 value. x1, x2. So x1 plus x2 divided by 2, so we find the average of the x values to get that middle x value. And then we find the average of the y values to find the middle y value. And the middle x and y value together form the midpoint. Alright, let's use it. There's 2 points, we need the midpoint. So here's the midpoint formula. Plug in the values. Here's x1, here's x2, so 2 plus 8. Here's y1 and y2, so 2 plus 12. So we're finding the average between the two x values, and we're finding the average between the two y values. 2 plus 8 is 10, 2 plus 12 is 14. Divide each of those by 2 again to find the average. We have 5, 7. The middle point or midpoint between those two is at 5, 7. Alright, now you try one. So there's a midpoint formula. Again, we take the average, so we're going to add negative, where's my cursor? Negative 3 plus 7. Find the average. And then 15 plus 3. And find the average of that as well. Those two added makes 4. Those two added makes 18. And that, when you divide it, is 2, 9. Alright, please try one more. This one, you're told the midpoint of a line EF is this. So you're actually given the midpoint, and the midpoint is 5, negative 6. And then it says find the coordinates of E, which is the beginning of that segment, and F, which are given 10 minus 10. So think about how you could set that up. Begin by writing the midpoint formula and substituting what you know, and then think about how you're going to proceed. Alright, let's try it. Here's the midpoint formula. In this case, we are told the midpoint, so I'm going to put midpoint here. And we don't know the x1 value, but we know the x2 value, so x1 plus 10, and divide by 2. and we don't know the y1 value, but we know y2. So y plus negative 10, y1 plus negative 10. All right, there's two unknowns here. However, we do know that this number has to end up being 5 because that's going to be the x value of the midpoint. And this number here has to end up being negative 6 because that's the y value of the midpoint. So I'm going to do two separate equations for each of those. This thing must be 5, so 5 equals that thing. If you solve this, you can multiply both sides by 2, which gives you 10 on this side, and that 2 is now gone. Now subtract 10, and you're left with x1 is 0. So it turns out the x value of that first point is 0. Let's try the same thing for y. All of this must create the y value of the midpoint, which is this. So negative 6 equals all of that. Multiply by 2 to get rid of this 2. You get negative 12 equals that. Now you can add 10 to get rid of that negative 10. Add 10 on both sides. So you get y1 equals, when you add 10 to that, you get negative 2. So there it is. So that missing point here, E, must be 0, negative 2. And this is the other endpoint. So endpoint, and then there's the midpoint. Alright, good job. There's no assignment to follow this, but make sure that you clearly know how to use the midpoint formula.